Well, I've lived with a migraine headache for 5 years now, as of this past July. And it's like, okay, there has to be more life than what I'm going through right now. I wouldn't try to ride a bike right now because the ability to do more than one thing at the same time
Uh-huh.
is just not there. This has helped me explain my thinking skills because you look at somebody and they look normal. You don't see what's going on behind the scenes. And I say, you take it for granted. I did for making a cup of coffee. You just put your coffee cup and you make your cup of coffee on the computer. But for me, it's a whole thought process. And there's times that those connections aren't firing. I don't know how I became the poster child for brain injury, but it ended up happening.
Welcome to the Managing Mental Health podcast. Join us as we talk to leading psychologists about all areas of mental health. And we hear from real people who have overcome real mental health struggles who can now offer hope and encouragement for us all. I'm Jamie, social psychologist, author, and trauma recovery coach. Our guest today is a multi-talented individual whose journey is a testament to resilience and the power of finding purpose through pain. Born and raised in southern Indiana, Rob Baugh began playing the piano at the age of 4, an early passion that has shaped his life. After a life-altering traumatic brain injury forced him to step away from his dream of opening a bakery, he spent 3 years seeking purpose through his pain. This led him to create Life Rewired Brain Injury Podcast, a platform dedicated to raising awareness of brain injuries, sharing hope, and fostering community. A first-time author, Rob released his book, My Life Rewired, with chronicles of his healing journey. With a natural ability to make others laugh, his true calling is to bring light and laughter to others, fulfilling his life's purpose of spreading joy and inspiration. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. This is a perspective that's not talked about enough, I think. And that's the idea of traumatic brain injuries and what all that entails after the fact. Um, Professionally, we may hear the term TBI, and that's what that means for people that are just hearing that. TBI is a traumatic brain injury. So tell us, let's just jump in and start with what happened, when, how did you get here?
Okay, sure. Well, it was a normal day. I I work from home and I have a fish pond out back. So on my very last break, I went outside to feed them like I always do. And when I was coming back in the door, a bee flew by my head. And I have a very severe allergy to bees. So it freaked me out. One put me in a hospital a few years prior. So that's a real trauma for me. It just so happened I was opening the door at the same time. And when I ducked, I hit my head and I cut it from about here to here, like 3-inch laceration, which turns out that actually saved my life because had I not cut my head open, they said I would have died from an internal brain bleed. So yeah, I came to and I was holding my head, and my first thought was, man, I'm gonna have a goose egg tomorrow.
Mhm.
And then when I took my hand away and I saw the blood, I'm like, no, I'm gonna have a very major change in my life. That my whole life was over at this point. Is what I thought. Um, my wife had been home that day because she had recently lost her job. COVID had just started and companies were shutting down. And so she found herself out of a job. And then she found herself into the caregiving role that she didn't know that she was going to be in. She got me to the hospital in a record time. I called her Daryl Earnhardt Jr. And 5 staples later, I was looking for purpose. They send you home and they give you little instruction on what to do after a brain injury. They just say, "Oh, just take a few days off, go back to work when you feel like it," which is like the worst advice you can give anybody with a brain injury.
Yeah.
So I hurried back to work and I thought after a couple of days, I'm thinking, when's this headache gonna go away? Well, I've lived with a migraine headache for 5 years now, as of this past July. And it's like, okay, there has to be more to life than what I'm going through right now. So I would lay in bed at night and couldn't sleep. So I would get on YouTube and try to find something to keep my mind occupied off of my pain. And I would try to find people that were talking about their brain injuries. I couldn't find anything. All I was finding was professionals saying, well, this is what a brain injury is. Well, I mean, I know what one is because I'm living it. I wanted to hear real life stories.
Mm.
And I just wasn't finding it. And I was talking to my counselor one day about it. And I said, it's just so frustrating that what I'm looking for is just not out there. And she goes, Rob, do it yourself. Oh, okay. I don't know how I became the poster child for brain injury, but it ended up happening. So, it was a rough start, but I was just very adamant that the help that I wanted to find, I wanted to make sure others could find it as well. Because I knew those dark nights when you're laying in bed and you're planning your own demise. You want to unalive yourself because you're just in so much pain and you feel so disconnected from the world. Everything that your whole life is gone. You sit there and mourn your old life that you wish you could get back, and it's just not coming back. So, yeah, kind of like yourself, I would have professionals on that gives people hope for brighter tomorrows, and other survivors that's I mean, let's just face it, a lot of them have gone through a lot worse than I have, and they're still pushing through. So, who am I to complain about a headache?
Yeah, right. 5 years of migraines. I think you've earned the badge and the honor of complaining about a headache. So, just for listeners that might be thinking, okay, I've hit my head before. I've hit my head on a door or the hood of a car or a box or something. What is something that would differentiate someone that hits their head between that and receiving an actual brain injury? How much more severe does it have to be?
Here's the thing, it doesn't have to be very severe at all to have these major symptoms. I mean, you can be in a car wreck and never hit your head, but the whiplash will cause a brain injury of some type. And the thing about brain injuries, they're like snowflakes. They'll look the same, but they're not the same. The person A could have, cognitive issues. I stuttered a lot that first couple of years. I could barely get words out.
Mm.
Now that happens to me whenever I get into stressful situations or if it's very late at night. And when that happens, I don't realize it's going on. My wife knows it because she's going, the words that are coming out of your mouth are not words. I know what I'm talking about. What, are you crazy? But everyone has similarities in their symptoms, but not everybody checks off every single box.
Right. So it's definitely a range of symptoms. It's sort of, and this is something interesting, I think, that we've sort of, I hope, normalized over the past few years, is that the idea of whether it's a physical brain injury, whether it's a mental illness, whether it's a neurodivergent issue, these are all on the spectrum.
Yeah.
So, which can be confusing for some people because they may think, okay, well, I feel this way, so I may not like depression, for example. People and men experience this, I think, more than women, but they may say, I just feel numb. I don't really feel sad. I just feel numb. So it can't be depression, but that's part of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And just like you're mentioning with the TBIs, you could have cognitive issues, you could
Mhm.
have emotional issues, all kinds of things. Okay. So really any type of head injury could possibly be a long-term issue. I'm curious, when you went to the hospital to get your staples, Did they do, did they run any other tests like an x-ray, MRI, anything in that moment? Or was that something maybe you had to come back and ask for?
They did do an X-ray that day, um, and they did a CAT scan.
That's it.
And yeah, and then after a few days turned into a few weeks of this massive migraine, my family doctor said, "Something's not right. We need to send you for an MRI." So they sent me for the MRI, and then they're like, "You have a brain injury. You have a traumatic brain injury." And here's one thing that I have found out in talking to all the survivors that I speak with:
Mhm.
hospitals don't like to use that word brain injury. Most of the time, the people that go in, they're released with paperwork that says, "You have a concussion."
Yeah. Why?
I have no idea why.
That's interesting.
And they don't give you details of what to do afterwards. They don't tell you that you're gonna need cognitive therapy most likely, depending on the severity of your brain injury. We had to learn all this on our own.
Hmm.
They didn't even tell us to follow up with a neurologist. My wife said, "We gotta get you in to see somebody."
Mhm.
And here's the thing too about neurology, they don't know everything.
Right. Right.
They spend very little time. I have learned since they spend very little time on brain injuries themselves because there's like a whole spectrum of things that they see people for. I always thought a neurologist was just basically for brain injury, but
Mhm.
it's not. Um, and one thing I caution people about is do your homework.
Mhm.
Go on health grades and read those reviews because I wish I would have done that because we found my very first neurologist, we fired him.
Mhm.
I went in, and as I mentioned, COVID had just started. So you couldn't go in with your spouse. They couldn't be your words for you. And the first thing he asked me was my birth date, and I could not remember it.
Uh-huh.
And he slams his pen down. He says, "The questions are going to get harder from here."
Oh.
And I'm in tears. I'm like, "What in the world?" Yeah, and he was telling me how, he's the best in this area, he one of those god complexes, and I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
"Uh,
Okay.
winner."
Okay, Mr. Know It All, Mr. Bedside Manner.
Uh-huh,
You failed. You skipped that class, didn't you? The bedside manner class.
uh-huh.
Yeah, that's. I'm sorry to hear you went through that. Unfortunately, it's not the first time I've heard a story like that. And I think for people that experience this, and like you're saying, obviously there's not enough education, there's not enough help out there for traumatic brain injuries. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. Um,
Mhm.
if you're going, one thing I think I've heard that helps is if you know you have an appointment coming up with a doctor, neurologist, whatever, sit down with your significant other, whoever that is, family member, whoever, and just write questions down on a piece of paper and take them with you. That way
Oh, yeah.
you don't feel quite as pressured in that moment to try to recall stuff. And yeah, don't be afraid to shop around if you can, if you have
Yeah.
options. All right, so we've covered uncovered a little bit here. Let's get down to a little bit more details. I'm curious to hear more about the suicidal ideation,
Mhm.
and I think this is an area that people wouldn't expect because if you have never dealt with this issue personally, um, like I wouldn't normally have put those two together. Someone
Yeah.
having a TBI and suicidal ideation being a part of that. How did that progress? Was it something that just after time, you just kind of felt so much weight and pressure and grief that kind of came with it?
I'll speak for myself, I won't generalize everybody,
Sure,
but
sure.
for me, it was living in the pain for one thing.
Hmm.
Constant pain really weighs on your mind. And then you get in bed at night and you're thinking about, I was really good at doing cakes. And I look back at the pictures now I don't know if you ever watched The Cake Boss, Buddy Belastro.
Mhm.
He was what inspired me to do that. And it became a side business for me. And I would look at my phone and look at the pictures of what I couldn't do anymore. I, I used to spend, like 3 hours. It affected my numbers too. But I would spend that many hours in the kitchen,
Mhm.
working on the details of the cake, and I couldn't do that anymore. The stress and the anxiety from the detail work, I couldn't do it. It was debilitating. So you're sitting there mourning everything you've lost. Your entire identity's gone. And like, how do I how do I go forward when I look in the mirror and I look like me, but I'm not me anymore?
Mhm.
So it really weighs on your mind. And then, especially when you can't sleep too. That's a bummer too.
Mhm.
And you're just going, there has to be more to life. Why am I here? You know? And yeah, there was times it was close. And I'm so thankful that my wife works from home now too, because she was with me all these times. And there was very, very little limited time that I was even able to do anything to end life.
Yeah.
So that's up to that.
Good, good. Yeah, again, I think that's something that we could all learn. Uh, there's a lot we could learn, but I think that's a very powerful point that when there is a traumatic brain injury, it's not just a physical injury. It
Mhm.
can cause such effects, like you're saying, especially if there's cognitive effects, you no longer have the same abilities that you did, which in your case, in the case of many others, brings grief because what you thought you were going to be doing in your life, you can no longer do. You can't function the same way.
Yep.
And you grieve what you've lost,
Mhm.
um, which brings about, like you said, the depression, the anxiety, and those other emotional issues with that. So I
Right.
think it's a very important lesson. Thank you for sharing that. Um, were there any other than say cognitive, thought processing, executive function, memory, those things? Were there any other physical changes in terms of from your injury? Did you have any kind of motor impairment that you hadn't noticed before? And I know you mentioned the migraine, so that's
Yeah.
physical pain.
Well, I wouldn't try to ride a bike right now because the ability to do more than one thing at the same time
Uh-huh.
is just not there.
Mm,
So I would be afraid that I would probably fall off the bike if I tried to ride a bike now.
mm,
And when I try this this has helped me explain my thinking skills because you look at somebody and they look normal.
mhm,
You don't see what's going on behind the scenes.
mhm,
And I say you take it for granted. I did for making a cup of coffee. You just put your coffee cup and you make your cup of coffee under the Keurig. But for me, I it's a whole thought process. I
mhm,
have to think, okay, I gotta grab the cup. I have to now grab a coffee pod. Now I have to do this. And there's times that those connections aren't firing.
mhm,
And my wife will come in the kitchen and she'll see me standing there and she'll say, "Okay, what were you doing? Are you wanting a bowl of cereal? Are you making a cup of coffee? Are you
mhm,
doing this, that, and the other?" And she'll help me walk through that process. I used to love to cook. And one day I'm sitting there holding a recipe and I look at the ingredients and I go to the cabinet and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, what was I coming after?
mhm,
So it finally dawned on me, carry the recipe with you. So I could say, okay, I need the time. So there's the time. It's just the little things that you take for granted that that people don't see going on behind the scenes.
mhm. Yeah, and you mentioning that, like learning that in order to do something, you need to adapt to what you used to do, but just do it in a new way of
Right.
taking the recipe with you while you're navigating the kitchen and getting ingredients, getting utensils, things like that. So that's a good point. Uh, what are maybe some other, like maybe just one or two or three um, recommendations, some things that maybe life hacks that you've kind of
Oh,
figured out after this that might help other people that are just now starting to navigate, these cognitive issues.
oh yeah. One that is a major must. And it doesn't have to be anything major for you to do this. I went to Target and I found this little, I think it's like a letter box. I'm not really sure what it is, but I call it my memory station.
Mhm.
Anything that I cannot lose, if they if I pull them from there, they have to go back in there. I'm not allowed to lay them down here, there, because I'll never find them again.
Mhm.
There's too many things in this house that's gone missing in the last 5 years that we'll probably never see again. But yeah, my keys, my wallet, my cell phone, everything that's of high importance goes in my memory station.
Okay. Good
Yeah.
idea. Good idea. Okay. What else? What's some other life hack you figured out that helps you navigate the world?
My wife thought of this, and it's genius, really, and it's simple. Um, I would drive, and I don't drive very far anymore because of the memory issues, but I would drive somewhere and I would forget where I'm going,
Mhm.
and I would panic, and I just had to pull over, and I'm like, "Where am I going?" So my wife says, "You know what? From now on, we're putting a pad of sticky notes in each car, and say if you're going to the dentist, I go to the dentist, and we stick it there on the steering wheel. So if I'm halfway there and I forget, all I gotta do is just glance down like, dentist or Home Depot or wherever you're going." I mean, so simple, but it's effective and it works.
How about, and you mentioned this earlier in terms of people doing their own research, learning as much as they can. What's maybe a resource that you've become aware of that has helped you a lot, or at least a direction for people to go in terms of learning more about TBIs?
Well, I'll say this, every time I find a resource that I had no clue was out there, I mean, here I'm 5 years out, I'm still finding things I didn't know existed,
Mhm.
and they're like well-kept secrets for some reason. So, when I wrote my book, the publisher says, "Well, you need a website." I'm like, "I don't know how to run a website." So she's like, "I'll help you." So we got that, and I said, "Well, the one thing that's a must is I want a list of resources." So anytime somebody, I don't care if they buy the book or not, but you can go there and you can find your resources. So it's been something that people don't have to recreate the wheel. And that's what I wanted. I wish I had these resources when I was, first out there. You know, psychologists that I've come across, coaches,
Mhm.
which I would love to add you to the website as well.
Okay.
Um, and there's a network called JAN. It's the Job Accommodation Network.
I've seen that.
I had no idea they existed.
I saw that recently, and I don't remember why, but I just saw that the other day. Jan, yep, Job Assistance Network. I think it was, I was doing some research on autistic uh, jobs connections,
Uh-huh.
if I'm not mistaken. But
Yeah,
yes,
they do all any disability, doesn't have to just be a brain injury, any disability, they
awesome,
can help. And
awesome
I'm like,
thought.
why don't they tell you about these resources when you need them? But they're not out there. And
Amazing.
another cool one, I don't want to self promote. Oh, it's not really for me, but um, there was a little boy recently. I was about to go to bed and I was scrolling through and I saw GoFundMe and it caught my eye because I was a little kid and I started reading and then come to find out the kid lived in our community
Hmm.
and he had spent 6 days in Jewish hospital in Louisville. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. And the mom's like, "No, there's something wrong with my child. I know my child."
Mhm.
So she drove him to Chicago, and within an hour, they found out that the boy had a massive brain tumor.
Oh,
So they were doing a GoFundMe, and you know how that works. GoFundMe's just people don't really give to them anymore.
mhm.
And I mean, I'm telling you what, it was on my heart. I have got to find something for this child. And I was doing my homework, I was Googling everything, and I've made some connections with the Brain Injury Association of America. And I reached out to him and I said, "Do you know of any resources out there that would help fund this child?" And he says, "Let me send you a list." And a list that he sent me, I was like, "Where do I begin?" And I just started looking through it, and I'm like, I'm gonna call this company here. This organization was out of Texas. It's called Team Luke. And I called them and we talked for, my gosh, maybe an hour.
Mhm.
And I told him, I said, I don't know these people from Adam. And I told him the situation, like, get in touch with them. We normally don't do the applications till the first of each month, but you tell them to fill this out right now.
Mhm.
And I don't see any reason why we can't approve this. And we'll put it towards the board tomorrow. Like, okay. And they were going to give the family 5 grand,
Nice.
which is a drop in the bucket, but still
That's help.
every penny helps. So then I immediately was like, okay, we got to get something on my website to help this child. So I've been reaching out to everybody I could find just to get this kid. And I don't even know this kid, but it really just touched my heart that he needs help.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway for anybody listening or watching is that, you know, on on this podcast, I talk about all areas of mental health. So it's going to be extremely rare that somebody has a personal connection with every single, you know, area that we're discussed. You don't have to. And that's the point is you can, if it's just helping to discuss the issues, helping lower stigma, helping
Yes.
increase awareness, funding, research, help for your neighbor, for your family member. If you can just do one thing, just do that. It will be a help. And that's how we build a ladder or a bridge is one
Mhm.
piece at a time, one step at a time. So you
Yeah.
might be that one step, that next step. Um, so that's great. And for everybody too, I'm making sure I've got your links to your website and your podcast. And I just made a note to put a link to Jan, that network. Also, I'll be in the description. So
Yeah.
you can find that there. All right. So let me, let me follow up with this one observation I made from watching one of your podcasts. I saw a quote that said, awareness isn't seasonal, it's a lifeline. What does that mean for you and the importance of TBI awareness?
And it's about building that community. And it's about helping everybody not feel invisible. You know, what's the saying? You don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
You know, I had reconstructive surgery on my foot. Oh gosh, it's been 8, 9 years ago now. And when I had that cast on, people would go out of their way to help me. But with an invisible injury, they don't see that. You look fine. So, you know, even if you tell them you have a brain injury, like, oh, you know, they assume because you're standing there in front of them, you're fine now.
Right.
No, it's not the case. I once had someone say, "You're driving, you're better." What's the connection between driving and being better? Many of us still drive. Our lives still have to go on. So it's about making people feel that sense of belonging.
That's great. Yeah, there's a lot of um, especially when it comes to mental illness and a lot of other injuries and diseases as well that we would consider invisible that
Mhm.
people may be dealing with and that you just can't tell just by looking.
Yeah.
Everything from chronic pain to TBIs, uh, like your story, depression, you name it. There's you never know what someone's going through, what they're dealing with. So just don't offer platitudes. It's
Yeah.
always my best advice, and offer to help when you can, and maybe take a few minutes to just ask. So, okay, well, tell me about that. Is there anything that I can help you with? If
Mhm.
I'm here if you want to talk or if you need anything. Uh, yeah, it only takes a moment to
Yeah.
understand and be kind.
You nailed it. It's about getting back to compassion and kindness. I feel like as a society, we are out of touch with that exactly because, we all go through things. That's a given. But we have lost that ability to be kind and compassionate to others.
Mhm.
And then I think once we start diving in and seeing, hey, I'm no better off than that person is, then it evens the playing field and you're like, "Oh, okay, well, let's have that talk." Like you just said, "Let's talk," you know? "What's on your mind?"
Yeah,
Sometimes people just wanna hear and be seen.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Rob, I appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to share with everybody. Um, there's so many cases, I think, of brain injury. And like we said earlier on, that people just don't know what all comes with that. It's
Yeah.
not just a matter of getting hit in the head and feeling dizzy or
Right.
having a headache. If the migraine was the only problem, you
Mhm.
know, that would be bad enough. But
Right.
I think people just aren't generally aware of
Mhm.
all the cognitive uh, effects, all the
Yep.
emotional effects. So it's great that you're sharing about your journey and helping to encourage and educate people. So thank you very much. Very very proud of you for doing that, and happy to have this time with you. Listeners, what resonated with you the most? What inspired you? Show some love in the comments, and like I said earlier, you can find the link to Rob's website, which has his book on there and his podcast. And I'm going to put a couple of these other resources in the description as well. As always, please subscribe, like, comment, and share, and hit that little notification bell, and stay connected to this community of well being as we learn and grow together.